There are a total of 29 armor pieces or armor sets that do get a special effect, and we're going to be ranking all of these from worst to best based on how useful they are in PvE. Now, yes, I know that 99% of the player base is only going to dress up for fashion, which is perfectly fine, but some of these armor sets or pieces are very useful and they might help you out with certain types of builds that you make now or in the future. Now, I'm just going to talk about the armor of which have special effects. I'm not going to talk about every single armor piece or every single armor set. And also, if you did want to know about like what's like the best damage negation to be at, or like what's the best poise to have for PvE, it's not going to really matter that much. Obviously, trying to get as high as damage negation as you possibly can, while staying in medium load. And in terms of poise, you probably want to reach about 51 or 61 poise if you can, because you will notice that it is going to make somewhat of a difference. If you can't reach that amount, then it's going to be perfectly fine. The game isn't going to feel that much different. But with that out of the way, let's just get into it. Starting off at number 29, the PELT of RALVA. This actually does boost your Bare Communion spells by 15%. Now, unfortunately, there is quite literally only one Bare Communion spell in the Roar of Regalia, and this spell is just terrible. It does awful damage, so 15% of terrible damage is, surprisingly enough, still going to be terrible damage. The entire purpose of this spell is basically just to stun lock enemies, so just having a helmet to boost its damage is not going to be that useful. Maybe when it does get buffed in the future, the helmet itself, in terms of its effect, will be more useful, but as it stands right now, you only want to wear this because you think it looks cool. Number 28, the Braided Cord Robe, which is one of the cooler looking chest pieces in the game, and it does give you 15% more damage to the Watchful Spirit spell and the Horned Ban tool. Now, both of these things just suck. The Horned Ban tool is probably like the best tool in the game, which is not saying much because it's still not going to be that good. It is like a pretty quick tracking projectile, but it's still a tool, so therefore the damage is just going to be awful. And being that it scales of things like intelligence and faith, with its descaling that it gets in both, you still is better off using spells, which speaking of which, Watchful Spirit is just going to be an awful spell because it has like 4 very slow tracking projectiles that like barely hit anything, and even if they do hit, they're going to be doing terrible damage. And yeah, 15% of terrible damage is once again still going to be terrible damage. The High Priest hat, this gives you a free +1 to intelligence and +1 to arcane. So if you did want to spec into your intelligence and arcane builds, this is just going to be a free +1. Maybe it helps you meet the minimum requirements. There are going to be like no intelligence arcane options as it pertains to things like weapons, and there are hardly any when it comes to things like spells. So it's not going to be that useful, but at least there's no negative side effects. Number 26, the SALZA hood. This thing actually does give you +2 to intelligence. And now if you did want a free intelligence boost, just to use the Renala hat, this thing actually does give you +3 to intelligence for free. And the damage negations are not going to be that different. This one might get a bit more poise, but yeah, for the most part, it's not really that useful. Number 25, a Divine Bird Helm. This helmet does give you +3 to strength, +4 to dexterity, does boost your Divine Bird Feathers spell by 10%, but it does actually reduce the effect of your healing flask by 10%, which if you don't know how much that is, say you have a +12 Crimson Flask, it's essentially like having something between a +7 or a +8 flask. So basically you're losing out on about 80 HP for every single time that you drink the flask, which if you end up drinking it about 10 times, you're losing out on over 800 HP, which is almost half an entire health bar worth of healing. And that is just not worth the +3 or +4 dexterity in my opinion, unless you're going with like a level 1 run, or just want to help meet the minimum requirements with certain types of weapons. Now it does also boost the damage of the Divine Bird spell by 10%, but this spell just sucks, and even with the 10% boost, it's still useless. Now it's number 24 and number 23. I want to talk about both the CURSEBLADE mask and the Horned Warrior Helm, because both of these things work the same way. The Horned Warrior Helm gives you +5 to strength, and the CURSEBLADE mask gives you +5 to dexterity. Now, unfortunately, they do have a trade-off of just reducing the healing effect of your flask by 7.5%, which is not going to seem that bad, but like the benefits of what you gain with +5 to strength or +5 to dexterity, especially at this point of the game, because you're going to be at least around about level 150 by the time that you actually acquire these items, and getting +5 into strength or dexterity is not going to mean much, but having 7.5% less heals is definitely going to be noticeable. So once again, these things are only going to be useful to help meet the minimum requirements with certain weapons, good for level 1 runs, maybe no hit runs, but outside of that, I'd rather have the extra heals. Number 22, number 21, both the Divine Beast Head and the Divine Beast Helm. Both of these things have the exact same effect, just slightly different numbers. They also look identical. One is just really large and one is just really small. Obviously, the larger one is going to be like twice as heavy and is going to have a bunch more damage negation. But in terms of their special effects, the Divine Beast Head, the larger one, does give you +5% more damage to all of your storm-based attacks, like your skills and spells. Also gives +4 to the strength stat, but it actually does decrease your healing effect by 12.5%, And as for the Divine Beast Helm, it gives you 4% damage to your storm-based abilities, plus 3 to strength, and decrease your healing by only 10%. Now, getting more damage to things like Stormblade, Stormcaller, Zamor Ice Storm, these are going to be very useful, but having the trade-off be potentially like just 12 or 10% less healing out of your flask is just not going to be worth it, because it is not that much more damage. Like, if you're really confident in how you're playing and you know that you're not really going to get hit, then maybe you can go ahead and use these things. But if you're going through the game for like the first time, and if you're trying to like learn the boss's movesets, these items are just not going to be that useful. It's just mainly to just min-max your builds on like second playthroughs if you just want to like stomp through the entire game with your really powerful storm-based skills. This is going to be like the major benefit. But unlike your first playthrough, I would kind of stray away from them because you do lose out on a lot of healing. Number 20, the Gravebird Helm. This actually does give you 15% more damage to your Rings of Spectral Light spell, which yes, it is just going to boost that one particular spell. And this spell is actually pretty decent. It goes very far. It can proc Frost. And with this helmet, you actually can do some decent damage. Now, the downside of this spell is that it is going to have a faith requirement, so it's not going to be useful for like pure intelligence builds, which most people are going to be speccing into pure intelligence if you wanted to use sorceries. But if you're at like a higher level rocking an int faith build and did want to use this spell a whole bunch because it is very useful, you can just throw on this helmet and its benefit of 15% more damage with no side effects. Number 19, the Death Mask Helm. This actually does decrease FP cost for spirit summons by 17%, which means that you can just save out on a bunch of FP. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't actually like decrease the requirements for the actual spirit summon. So if you didn't have the requirements in FP costs as it pertains to like really expensive types of summons, you can't just put on this helmet and meet the requirements that way. You still have to have at least that much FP to cast the spirit summon, but it is actually still going to decrease your FP cost. So you can just like switch onto the helmet, use your spirit summon, and then switch off the helmet, and you could just save a bunch of FP that way. It's not going to be like the most useful thing, but it is a strat that you can use. Number 18, the Crucible HAMMER-HELM. Now, this is basically going to be identical to all of the other Crucible helmets, and that is going to boost your Crucible incantations by 4%. Now, it does also increase the damage of the Devonia's hammer weapon skill, ends the aspect of Crucible Wings, Ash of War 2, and also if you did want to know, the other Crucible armor sets will boost those things as well, but yeah, it still doesn't work with things like the THIOLLIER'S tree or the Ordovis's Greatsword, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, this helmet in particular is not going to be any more useful than like the other types of Crucible helmets, but I did want to highlight the importance of being able to improve Crucible incantations and Crucible skills. Number 17, the Imp Head Line. This gives you +2 to the Vigor stat, and it's just going to be for free. More Vigor, you can't really go wrong. Now, at higher levels, once you do reach like the soft caps, +2 to a particular stat is not going to be like that crazy. But if you were like struggling as to which like helmet that you wanted to pick to just boost a certain type of stat, just throw in this one. You can't go wrong with more Vigor. Number 16, the GREATJAR. This is just going to be an upgraded version of the regular jar helmet, because instead of giving +15% to your pots, it's going to give you +16%, but it is also going to work with the hefty pots too, not just the smaller ones. So if you did want to go with a pot build, this is going to be the one to use. It's just going to maximize your damage to all of your pots, and it is going to be by a decent margin. It also is going to be a decent helmet in terms of like physical damage negation and poise, and it looks really cool. Number 15, I want to highlight the THIOLLIE'S set, specifically the Mask and the GARB, because both of these things do give you additional arcane. The Mask giving you +3 to arcane, and the GARB giving you +2. Which just having just +5 to arcane for free is going to be very nice, because the only way to boost your arcane in this game is going to be by like helmets that also just give you negative side effects, and with like a couple of talismans, one of them also giving you negative side effects too. There's like no crystal tier at all. So you kind of have limited options when it comes to boosting things like arcane. So just being able to have +5 with just a couple of pieces of armor is just going to be nice. It's not going to be anything groundbreaking. It might help you meet the minimum requirements for certain types of like weapons or spells, but it can just mean more damage and more blood loss build up too. Number 14, ST.TRINA'S Blossom. This is going to be 6% more to your FP bar, which I guess is just great. It could mean just a few more casts with like a skill or a spell. Now, obviously the helmet is not going to have like the greatest amount of damage negation or poise, but if you were going to go into like a caster build of which you're just sitting at a safer distance anyway, not going to really get hit as much and you can just keep spamming away, you could just throw on this and just benefit with more FP. Number 13, the Fire Knight Armor. This actually is going to boost your Mesmer Flame incantations by 4%. Now, the fact that it's actually a chest piece is really good because most of the special effects come from helmets, so you can just throw this one on alongside other types of helmets to just further enhance your Mesmer Flame incantations. Now, all the incantations as a whole are not going to be like that amazing, Serpent Flame and Mesmer's Orbs are like very solid, and if you did want to build around those particular spells, then this chest piece is just going to be the best thing for you. And 4% is going to be the same boost of which the Faithful Canvas Talisman does give, so you're going to see it as like a free talisman. Number 12, the Divine Bird Warrior Greaves. This is going to be 4% more damage to your kicking and stomping attacks, and yes, this will stack with the Shattered Stone Talisman, but it is going to include all of the kicking attacks that you get with the Dane's Footwork. It is going to include like Hoar Frost Stomp, Divine Beast Frost Stomp. The Poison Kick Ash War is also going to get boosted. Now, unfortunately, it does not work with the Stamp skills. Those do not get boosted. And having this as a part of your legs is going to be very useful because there's basically like no other leg pieces in the game that do give you a special effect. So you're not really losing out on anything by having this equipped. Number 11, the Circlet of Light. This actually does give you +1 to Faith, Intelligence, and Arcane, and also does give you 10% more damage to the Mikula incantations, which include things like the Multi-Layered Ring of Light, the Discus of Light, Triple Rings of Light, Radagons. All of these spells do get boosted by 10%. Now, unfortunately, for some reason, it doesn't boost the Light of Mikula. You'd think that it would, but even like the Dry Leaf Seal that said it's supposed to boost Mikula incantations doesn't also boost this one particular spell. Hopefully, it's a bug that does get fixed, because out of all the spells that you think would be Mikula's incantations, this would be like the major one. Number 10, the Fire Knight Helm. This is going to give you 2% more HP, 5% more stamina, and 5% more equipment load, which having percentage-based boosts is as much better than having like a flat amount, because once you get to those higher levels and after you've reached the soft caps, these things are just going to help improve it by even more. The way to like look at this helmet is that it's essentially going to be like the exact same thing as like the Erdtree Favor, just in the format of a helmet. Now it's only going to be like the regular basic version. Obviously like the +2 Erdtree Favor is going to be much better, but just having a bit more health, stamina, and equipment load by just equipping a helmet is going to be great. Number 9, the Finger Robe. This actually does boost the finger sorceries by 8%, which is actually really good. That's basically just as much of a boost as the Graven Mass Talisman, and it is going to be a chest piece, which is great because there's not many special effect chest pieces out there to compete with, so you're just only going to benefit by just having it equipped. And the finger sorceries are actually all pretty solid. Glintstone Nails is really good. Fleeting Microcosm I like a lot as well. Now the obvious downside is that you're going to look a bit stupid, but who says no to this free damage? Number 8, Mesmer's Helm. Now it is just going to be for the regular Mesmer's Helm, not the altered version, because the regular one does give you +8% to your Fire Knight skills, which include things like Flame Spear and Flame Skewer, and actually does give you +3% to your Mesmer Flame incantations. So it's just going to be a nice 2-for-1. So if you actually did want to utilize using both of these skills and the spells, you can just throw on this helmet. Now, if you actually weren't planning to use the Mesmer incantations, but you did want to use the Fire Knight skills like Flame Spear, I'd recommend just going with the Winged Serpent instead, because that is boosted by more. So this helmet is only really going to be useful if you wanted to use the spells. Number 7, the Dancer's Set. Every single piece of this armor set does boost the damage of dancing-based skills by 3% per piece. So if you have the entire armor set on, it is going to be 12% more damage to things like the Regalia and the Mariah's Executioner Sword weapon skill, Eleonora's Pole Blade skill, Sword Dance, the Giant's Red Braid, the Dancing Blade of Rana. It actually is also going to work with the heavy attack of the Flowing Curve Sword and the Dancing Blade of Rana. Both of these heavy attacks do just get boosted by this armor set. Now the problem with this is that all of these skills tend to be close range with like long animations, so they tend to be pretty risky and you might end up getting hit in most cases, and this armor set is definitely not meant for tanking. It does not have much damage negation at all. So I would only really have this armor set if you were like confident that you weren't going to take much damage, because 12% more damage to these already amazing skills is going to be pretty hard to pass up. Number 6, the Death Knight set. This actually does boost all of your lightning spells and your lightning Ashes of War by a total of 8%, which is going to be 2% per piece. Now, this is obviously going to be really good because, one, there's no negative side effects. The armor set itself actually does have some very good damage negation. So, like, basically any single type of, like, faith build, you're just going to benefit of having this equipped. Now, it is just going to boost all of your Dragon Cult lightning spells. So, it's not going to include things like the Bale spells or Placid Dusax's Ruin. It's just going to include, like, the Red Lightning, the Yellow ones, and, like, the Frost Lightning spells. And in terms of, like, the weapon skills, it is not going to boost things like the Dragon King's Cragblade, Bolter Grandsax, Dragon Scale Blade, or Dragon Halberd. These do not get boosted. It does boost things like the Death Knight Twin Axes and the Death Knight Great Axe. And it is going to boost all of the lightning-based Ashes of War, except for Lightning Ram, which is annoying. I wish that one did get boosted because that's like the best lightning Ash of War in the game. But just getting a total of 80% more damage while looking really cool and having some decent damage negation, it's not going to be bad at all. Number 5, the Winged Serpent. This helmet does boost your Fire Knight skills by 10%, which is just amazing because that includes Flame Spear and Flame Skewer. Flame Spear probably being the better one. This skill just does so much damage, especially when fully charged. It does actually buff your weapon as well. Now, this helmet is not going to help boost the buff of the skill. It is just going to help boost the damage, but just having 10% more damage on an already S tier type of skill that is going to obviously stack with all the other talismans that you have, it's kind of just a no-brainer. Number 4, the Gravebird BLACKQUILL armor. Now, this is going to be identical to the Raptor Blackfeather's chest piece in that it does boost your jumping attack damage by 10%, and some of the most broken builds in the entire game can be jumping attack types of builds, like with Power Stance Curved Swords or Twin Blades. These can just be utterly broken. Now, I'm actually just going to like this one more than like the Raptor Feather's chest piece, because 1, it looks cooler, it does get more poise, it's lighter, and across the board, typically it just gets more damage negation too. So it's kind of just a direct upgrade to the Raptor Blackfeather's chest piece. Number 3, the ANSBAC'S set. This actually does boost the damage of your Blood Oath and Dynastic skills by 14%. It's 5% for the helmet and 3% for every other piece. And the whole armor set is not going to be that bad either. You don't really get that bad a damage negation with the entire set equipped. But having the whole thing equipped means that you get 14% more damage with things like the Bloody Hellas skill, Obsidian Lamina, Bloodblade Ashmore, Bloody Slash, Blood Tax, Rivers of Blood, Reduvia. All of these things get boosted by 14% if you just have the entire set equipped. Which that is just amazing. Like, Bloodblade is already like an S tier skill in this game, and just one of the best, and now it's just gotten even better. Bloody Hellas is also like an S tier weapon. Blood Tax has just gotten even better in this DLC because the Great Katanas exist, and you can pair those alongside with that, and it's going to be doing amazing damage and blood loss split up, and it gets great synergy with the blood sucking tier, and now you can just get even more damage. And now that the Rivers of Blood has basically just gotten a passive buff is also going to be nice, because typically it was just outclassed by double slash on a Nagakiba, but now that can kind of bring it more in line. So it's just a lot more useful now. So yeah, if you were to go with any one of these skills, this armor set is very good. Number 2, LEDA'S armor. Now, this chest piece right here boosts the damage of your running attacks, rolling attacks, crouching attacks, backstepping attacks. All of those things get boosted by 10%, which is just kind of silly because it's a chest piece that doesn't have any negative side effects, and it actually gets some decent damage negation and some decent poise, and it looks really cool. There's like no reason to just like not run it at all. Like, you're just getting 10% more damage to every single one of these attacks that you're probably just going to use throughout half of your time playing this game. And yes, this is just going to stack with the crossed tree talismans too to just further enhance the damage. Number 1, the Rakshasa set, which this is quite literally just free damage. That's what it does. The whole perk is free damage. Every single piece gives you 2% more damage to all sources, weapons, skills, spells, so that you can get 8% more damage just by having this entire armor set on. Now, there is going to be the negative side effect of it making you take more damage, but the game's idea of making you take more damage is just by slightly like just getting rid of some of the damage negation that the armor set has. So yeah, that's basically the trade-off. It's like you have 8% more damage, but your armor set is just not going to be as good as some other armor sets. Because yeah, it's still going to perform better than like a lot of lighter armor in the game, but just for its own weight class, maybe like pound for pound, it's like not as good as all of the other ones, but it's not going to be that much worse. Like, there are other armor sets that are probably like the same weight as this, but just get like 1 more extra physical damage negation. So practically this thing has like no downsides. It's just free damage. Anyway, that is the video now done and complete. As always, let me know what your opinions are down in the comments below. And please do like and subscribe because we do have a bunch more videos coming out along the way. The next one, I'm not sure what it's going to be. I might talk about the consumables. I kind of want to make more builds specifically related to like the base game. Some of the cool weapons that might have just been buffed by some like new talismans that we have. I might want to talk about some of those. And also do follow me on Twitch as well, because I am doing a bunch of new challenge runs related to the DLC. So if you do want to see those, give me a follow there. Anyway, catch you guys around. Bye.